Hi, everyone. It's Roger Collia, music director of Symphony New Hampshire, and I am speaking with our cellist, Jeffrey Ziegler, for our upcoming concert where Jeffrey is going to be performing Arvo Pärt's Fratres with the orchestra. Jeffrey, it's so great to have you. Where are you speaking to us from today?
Well, actually, looking at the background with all the light, it probably looks like I'm sitting on a cloud somewhere. But I'm actually home. I'm at in my living room in Brooklyn, in Williamsburg, and yeah, it's a beautiful day as long as you're indoors. It's very cold and windy, but yeah, it's nice to be
Yeah,
home.
I'm speaking from Indiana, Bloomington, Indiana, and it was 29 degrees this morning. I couldn't believe it. It's like there was actually frost on the car.
But just tell me one thing, and just be honest. When you saw all the frost and the car and everything, was your first thought Game of Thrones, winter is coming? Just be
Yes, 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 absolutely. How did you get into music? What was your journey like, and how did this all happen?
Um, well, I mean, I would love to say that my parents took me to a concert and I saw the cello and I pointed and I said I want to play that one, but it's really not that straightforward. It's actually much more of a fluke, really. I grew up, as I mentioned, in Fremont, and at that time, back when there was still a lot of music in the public schools, um, I signed up for a exploring music program. My parents were always very encouraging
Hmm.
for both my brother and myself to study music. They're not musicians myself. My father was retired military and he worked with computers, and but there was always a sort of encouragement for things like books and music and the arts and sciences and anything that they felt was going to make us intellectually
Hmm.
stronger. My first instrument actually was the flute,
Hmm.
and it wasn't because, again, I didn't point at the flute and say that's the one I wanted to play. Um, my brother had played the flute, and
Hmm.
there's a flute in the house, so just we weren't rich, so that was what I played. Um, but then I signed up for this workshop um, that was connected somehow to our local junior college, Ohlone College, and had the opportunity to play the recorder and sing. And I'd like to call it playing the violin, but I think it's more like scratching on the violin. And at the end of the program, the person who was the violin teacher, she asked my parents if I wanted to study the cello. And I remember very clearly I said, sure, because I knew that I wanted to play music, but then my second line was, well, what is it? Like, I didn't know what a cello was at that point. The teacher, her name is Ariel Whitbeck, uh,
Hmm.
whom I'm still in touch with. I received an email from
Oh,
her
wow.
weeks ago. I owe her an email, but
That's awesome.
she was the one who got me started.
Yeah,
Group lessons,
yeah,
and that was the beginning. I didn't exactly pick the cello because I didn't know what it was, but there was something about the instrument that I must have really connected with. Maybe the fact that it was probably the same size as me, I don't know.
yeah. Right, right.
But I stuck
Yeah.
with it over the years, and along the way, I mean, there were several teachers, mentors along the way. They were always very encouraging
Hmm.
um, of me. But in looking back, I know where I was mentally at every stage, and
Hmm.
I honestly had no idea what I was getting myself into. I,
As you were going through college, did you know what you wanted to do? Did you want to be a soloist? Did you want to play in an orchestra? Did you want to teach? Because I know there's so many different avenues in music, and it's very competitive, of course, all of these different avenues. So, what was going through your head as you were kind of wrapping up your college career, I guess?
well, I mean, I think that at that point, there were a few seeds that had already been planted by my teacher, Margaret Tate. Um, I had dinner with her several years ago, and I told her everything that happened. It's all her fault, actually. 'Cause
Uh,
in addition to playing in the orchestra, she also had a string quartet, the Aurora Quartet,
mhm.
which I'm not sure if they're still playing together, but they were together for several decades, and it was comprised of several members of the orchestra and they had a residence, not a residency, but they performed regularly on the Old First Church series in San
Hmm.
Francisco. And they every program it had the same format, like a 19th century, uh, sorry, 18th century or classical period string quartet, then a contemporary quartet, and then
Nice.
something a little bit more romantic. And but the contemporary piece was not like Shostakovich, the early
Hmm.
Shostakovich, sort
Hmm.
of like Andrew Imbrie or Charles Warren or something really
Oh,
challenging.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and that really made an impact on me. I'd never heard music like that before. And actually, come to
Mhm.
think of it, at that time, the San Francisco Symphony was also programming a lot of music of that ilk. So uh,
Sure.
it was sort of like in my mindset that I knew I wanted to do things that were a little bit more outside of the boundaries of kind of
Yes.
traditional classical. And then the idea of playing in a string quartet.
Yeah, yeah,
And
right.
when I was in college, of course, I wanted to play chamber music. All of my friends were excited about chamber music. Even actually, come to think of it, even in high school, my friends in the San Francisco Youth Orchestra, we would get together and read a lot of chamber music at each other's
Nice.
homes. Sharon Mann, the piano professor, I think she's still teaching at the San Francisco Conservatory, but she would have an annual chamber music reading party for New Year's.
Nice.
Literally just go from room to room, and every room had a different.
Oh,
Oh,
wow.
you're a cellist. Let's do the
Yeah,
chamber quintet. And so I was always surrounded by people who were excited about chamber music. So I got excited.
sure.
And then, of course, when I eventually went to grad school, I did my master's with Paul Katz of the
Yes.
Quartet. And so I think that it just, the idea of chamber music was always there, and everything just kind of became more and more focused on string quartet.
Well, yeah, and that kind of leads me to my next question, or something we could talk about, is the fact that, you joined one of the most acclaimed string quartets in the world with the Kronos Quartet. And funny story, I discovered the Kronos Quartet while I was in college, actually, freshman year of college. I remember the album George Crumb's Black Angels. And what a, interesting piece of music. I thought it was terrifying when I first heard it. I never heard music like this. But
Mhm.
then I looked at the score and I said, how is this humanly possible? How can someone play this?
You read
And
it.
it was shocking to me. So I just wanted to, pick your brain a little bit about that experience and how you got involved with this quartet and some of the interesting projects that you took part in.
Yeah, I mean, my the path to the Kronos Quartet, what led me to their doorstep, um, was I'd actually played in another string quartet before Kronos. It was the Curliano Quartet, actually formed at Indiana University.
Oh, nice. Nice.
Our mentor was Attar Arad.
Yes, he's still here.
Yeah, and we went to Juilliard for their quartet program.
Yeah.
We won the Fish-Off competition. Like things were kind of moving in
Oh,
a
right.
very positive direction. But then, after about 6.5, 7 years, I decided to move on from the quartet. At that point, we were based in Pennsylvania, so I quit the quartet. I moved back to New York. Actually, I moved in with my girlfriend at the time, who is now my wife, and
Nice.
I decided that I wanted to give New York freelancing a try, and I decided I never wanted to play in a quartet ever again. Uh, and so I was living in New York freelancing for about 6 months,
Hmm.
and I was called in to do a recording session with this ensemble, uh, which I thought was kind of odd. Like, if I can just speak freely, like,
Of
if you're
course.
part of a group, you hire a sub for a concert, but do you hire a sub for a recording? I don't know. But
Yeah.
for a
I
recording.
don't know.
And so I came in to play with them. It
Mhm.
was a recording of Brian Fennelly's music,
Oh, yeah. Yes,
and
yes.
which it was actually really wonderful pieces. Uh,
Right.
and the producer for the album was Judy Sherman. And um, at that point, I decided, okay, freelancing is great, but I wanted to have some kind of a steady gig. And so I had applied for this job at Smith College. It was actually a split job between Smith College and Mount Holyoke College.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and I got the job, and I was so excited. And they were, I'd even signed the contract.
Yeah.
So Judy Sherman, when we were taking a break in the recording, she was like, "Well, what are you doing this summer?" And I was like proud of myself. I said, "Nothing. I'm not doing anything," because Smith College pays on the fiscal calendar. So I just thought I was so young. I just thought it was the coolest thing that they were going to start paying me in July when I didn't have to start working. So,
That's awesome. That's great.
girlfriend at the time, my wife, we were like, we're going to go down to Mexico and hang out for a vacation, you know?
Mhm.
And so I was like, Judy, I'm not doing anything. We're just nothing. And so she said, well, let me get your phone number. Somebody might call you about something.
Yeah.
And then a few days later, I got a phone call from David Harrington,
Mhm.
and they were looking for somebody to sub for the
Nice.
summer. And
Nice.
that summer job kind of became an 8-year commitment.
You're performing with Symphony New Hampshire, a work that I mean, yes, it's contemporary. It's 20th century. It's a fascinating work that's not traditionally done on the cello. A lot of our audience might not know this, but Arvo Pärt, from 2011 to 2018, he was ranked as the world's most performed living composer. He just celebrated his 85th birthday, Arvo Pärt, which is wonderful. And he's based in Estonia. This is a work that I absolutely adore. I think it's beautiful in its own way. As a cellist, what do you hope to bring to this work? And really, what do you enjoy about the work?
I do have this idea about how music exists in the
Mhm.
universe, and um, I mean, it's somewhat spiritual, but it's just the idea that music is actually happening, even when even before I take the cello. The music is already happening. It's in our mind. It's in this it's this other plane that it exists, and so. Um, when I think of Fratres, especially, I mean, this isn't a piece that I only play on the cello. I think that I'm adding like some words to a much larger document of human existence, and
Mhm.
I'm just making my own contribution to something that's way beyond. And does it have an impact? I don't know. I don't know, but it's
Right,
something that um, it's really special. It touches all of us, and I think that everyone who plays the piece and everybody who listens to the piece, regardless of whether it's a string quartet version or, um, you know, actually when I was in college at Rice University, I was in a quartet, and we played the piece, and I mean it's a beautiful piece, but it's not the same experience as um, uh, the different kind of solo instrumental versions. They're very virtuosic, and this piece is it's very slow moving, but there are moments where it's like a rocket ship, and
right. Yes.
even moments where it's much more um, kind of lyrical. Uh,
Yes.
the triplet one,
Yes. Yeah.
the 16th note,
Uh-huh.
it's you're walking a tightrope, but you have to do it in a
Oh,
way that's
yeah.
very effortless.
I
And
mean, yeah, I was just going to add, the amount of technique, well, I say technique, but the amount of notes you have to play it's scary, and you have to make it sound so relaxed and so easy, especially the opening. It's just you playing those fast, runs or arpeggios. And, that's what, a minute and a half right there of music. It has to be somewhat terrifying at first. When you first come out, you're the boss.
it's so awesome. For that entire opening is just pacing yourself.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? And you want to start as if not like you're starting from several miles away, like maybe several centuries away.
Yeah, yeah.
Like
Like
it's and it goes. You're right. It's like a minute and a half, but like you don't want to you don't want to be in the room until
right.
maybe the last 10 seconds. And that's very difficult to do when you're playing so many notes and you're
Yes.
cooking along, but to keep the control, to keep everything
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah, this balance of, keeping your cool, your mind really relaxed and, emotion, emitting emotion, especially because it starts pianissimo or really soft and then it becomes what fortissimo, really loud and powerful. Yeah, and you have to be just cool as a cucumber.
Yeah.
And then I love the fact then that clave and the bass drum come in, and it's so it just changes the mood completely, the emotion.
Hmm.
Fascinating.
Genius.
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. Um, how do you go about preparing this work? I mean, it's 11 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, depending on the tempo you take. What is your routine like, your practice routine?
Actually, a lot of intonation work. Yeah, and a lot of shifting,
Yes,
intonation
yes.
shifting. Um, it's interesting. Like even when you take different instrumental passages out of context, there's a part of your mind that's tapped in. Like if there's like this cable, like we have this sort of connection to this other dimension where we're hearing the orchestra and
Right,
those chords.
right,
Like it's sort of like both on stage and in the practice room,
yeah.
we're connecting with this other dimension.
Any favorite cellists or recordings of this work in particular that you can think of?
The recording that I think had the greatest impact on me was the original recording. Um, I was thinking back before our conversation, I was trying to remember the first time I heard this piece. Um, and I think that it was actually, I want to say it was in college. And um, I think some friends of mine had told me about this piece.
Hmm.
And and I was home for the holidays, and I went to I want to say it was a Amoeba one a branch had opened up in Fremont at the um, at the Hub. That was our local mall. It was called the Hub, and I used to go there. I used to love Amoeba actually, just to say my age, because like you would go in with your old CDs and you'd trade them in and you'd get some value. Then you'd go back and turn around and buy something and discover something. And before the internet and before Spotify and everything, Apple
Yeah.
Music, this is because buying CDs costs money. So this was the way to kind of learn about music, either that or go to the library, right?
Right.
So, um, and I remember buying the old ECM recording.
Hmm.
I can't remember the name of the violinist, but I think was
Hmm.
that his wife, I think, playing, and with the prepared piano, and it knocked my socks off because I had never heard anything like that. And of course, at that time,
Hmm.
I could never have imagined that somebody would have the idea to arrange the piece for cello.
You mentioned mentors, and a lot of your mentors serving as inspirations. And I was reading, you're on the faculty at the Mannes School of Music. I believe you're the chair of the string department there. And you've served as a guest teacher, at different music festivals. I believe I read also that you were a guest teacher at Indiana University for a semester. I think that's fantastic. And I was curious, what do you enjoy about teaching? And do you have any advice for students who are planning on becoming professional musicians or teachers, something in the music industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think that teaching and mentorship, in not a dissimilar way that I talk about the conversation that we as musicians have with this other dimension, um, musical dimension. I think that how we interact with the younger generations, with every generation, that conversation is kind of at the core of everything that we do. I don't know how to be a musician without having that kind of a dialogue. Um, it's more than just it feels good or oh I learned something about myself. Like I think that is the conversation. That is what it means to be an artist actually. And so I really enjoy um, teaching. I really enjoy just kind of kicking ideas around with students with of every instrument because I think that these conversations they are conversations, you know, a dot on the page, or even principles of instrumental playing. How it applies to everyone individually is a conversation because we all have different length arms, our fingers are different,
Yes.
you know, our torsos are different lengths. So how do you hold the instrument, the angles? But it's not a, I'm not dictating anything. We're having a
Right.
conversation. Um, and so I really enjoy that conversation on every level.
Yeah.
But as far as advice for younger people, I mean, you know, a lot of, I mean, the world is constantly changing, and it's changing now, and it might change tomorrow. But you know, the thing is, I remember having some conversations with my teachers, like especially Paul Katz,
Yeah.
about just on a practical level, taking everything that you've learned in school and how does that translate into a successful professional life. And you know, I'm middle aged. I'm halfway through, and or rather 20 years in.
Yes.
And I think that kind of, I mean, there's a big change that occurred between my generation and my teacher's generation,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's the internet. The internet completely
Yes.
changed the equation in every way,
Yep.
from you know how we consume music, how we expectations for music, what albums are like. I used to think that albums could be longer, but I think albums are actually getting shorter. You know, just in every way, management, etc. And what that means is still changing. And then, you know, students coming out of graduating this year, I had some students graduating this spring in the middle of COVID, and I'm like, I don't know what to say. Like, this is a really awful situation. I've trained these students to become performers, and there are no concerts, you know.
Yes.
And so, what do you say to the next generation? And I think even though the dynamics change, whether we're talking the internet, COVID, there will be more things changing the dynamics. I think that the core principles of what we need to do don't change. How that will translate into paying rent, you will have to figure out. But I think that so many times people have this, I think, false idea of what kind of a musician they think they need to be in order to do X or to do Y. Um, and I am shocked with how many people don't know why they play the music that they play.
Yes.
My teacher assigned it to me. Okay, great. You know, I'm working on my spiccato. Okay, great. But you know, who are you as an artist? Who are
Yeah.
you as a cellist? Because you do have an influence on what kind of life you have as a musician. You don't want to end up playing in string quartets if you hate
Yes.
string quartets. You know, if you love contemporary music, then that needs to be your, or not even just contemporary music. Like if you want to specialize in Eastern
Yep.
European minimalism, that could be your thing. But you have to be happy doing that.
Yeah.
Now, if you choose something super obscure, um, there are certain things that you also have to expect in life. You know,
Mhm.
if um, in many ways, although it's changing now, obviously, but playing in an orchestra, if some people who that may be their lifelong dream to play in an orchestra, and I think in a lot of ways that or teaching in a university are probably the most stable
Yeah.
as far as regular income. I guess in the end, you have to be true to yourself because you will be happy, and by definition, then your loved ones, your family, the people near you will also be happy.
Have you spent any time in New Hampshire, or will this be your first time?
Actually, this won't be my first time to perform in New Hampshire, but
Okay.
I have not performed in New Hampshire very often.
Okay.
Yeah, and so
Oh,
I'm definitely looking forward to getting to know the New Hampshire audience, and also let's face it, like in this moment of pandemic, um, the idea of being in a room and listening to live music is something that nobody is taking for granted, and so to be able to share share music with a live audience. Um, I mean, hopefully I won't cry, you know? I mean,
It's
it'll be a really special moment.
and it's very unique, the situation we're in. And you know, I'd wrap it up with this question. You know, the fact that, and you've alluded to this, performing music for a while was such a routine activity for us for so many years, and now all of a sudden the pandemic happens. Performing in public is extremely difficult. How has your attitude towards music and performing for an audience changed?
Hmm. Um, well, I think that it was, I have to say, in some ways, the ways that it has changed. I was already sort of moving in this direction before the pandemic. Um, just kind of, just to get a little personal, my father passed away like 5 years ago, and I think that that moment definitely was a triggering moment for me, because even though I feel very grateful for every project that I've been involved in, I feel I invest my complete self in everything that I do. Um, but I kind of looked at it from a different perspective, where I no longer wanted to play music that didn't matter. That I felt just a kind of a renewed feeling that I wanted to make sure that that it had some kind of a relevance beyond just myself, that for other people, for the world, for just the betterment of society. And so um, it was a kind of a reality check that I was going into, and I think that the pandemic has actually um, increased that feeling a millionfold, you know, because we can't take anything for granted anymore. And this is something that um, you know, I think everyone who loves music, which I think everybody actually loves music. It's just that they don't know it yet, because you know I don't trust anybody who doesn't actually love music. Even for people who don't go to concerts, they have a record collection, or not records, but they have a music collection. So we all music. It's a human need. Um, so, but the idea of giving something live, it's in a musical way, it's actually giving everybody a gift.
Yes.
It's actually a two-way gift. We're actually connecting with other human beings, and the only way that we all fully realize that is when it was taken away. And
Absolutely.
I remember very vividly my last concert before lockdown. It was in March, I believe March 12th, at the Strathmore Mansion in
Yep.
Maryland. And I was just going to drive down from New York, play the concert, and drive home. And I remember like emailing the presenter the morning of, like, "Are you sure this concert's happening?" And they said, "No, no, no, no." And so I'm okay, okay, I'm gonna come. And you know, for the people that came, it was like this. Actually, to this moment, I actually think about. I wonder how every one of them are doing. I actually felt like we had this experience together, this
Hmm.
final concert, March 12th, before everything shut down, and we didn't know when we would all be able to meet in the same room ever again, you know? And it felt that much more meaningful and important.
Right.
It really important. Like what we do is really important. Um, the
Yeah.
more I play music, the older I get, I think the less I actually understand about how music works, because it is magic. I don't understand it, but it is magic that we need as human beings. And we're starting, concerts are starting to happen in little trickles. But I just hope um, that for anyone who was sort of on the fringes of, oh, should, you know, concerts, and I don't know if we should support this series, and like, you know what? It's actually very important. It's something that we as human
Yes.
beings need. It's like food. We actually
Yes.
need this to survive.
Orchestra hasn't, we haven't performed as a group, as a family, since March, like you mentioned. This will be the first time. Our concert on Friday, November 20th will be the first time we're all together. And I know it's not everyone, it's only 10 musicians, but still, that is so special for us as an organization. Even if we can't have in big audience like we normally would in our home concert hall at the Keep, this moment is going to be somewhat historic in a way for us to come back together.
Mhm.
Um, and, for us, this means so much to us as an organization, and also for the community. It will be really very special, I think. Yeah, we're going to have a great time, and I can't wait to finally meet you in person in
Same.
just a few weeks.
Yes, I'm so looking forward to meeting you in person and to make music together and to share this phenomenal, timeless masterpiece with the New Hampshire audience.
Well, we're so fortunate. It was such a pleasure speaking with you today, Jeffrey, and I will see you in just a couple of weeks. Thank you.
I'll see you in a few weeks. Thank you.